Hello everyone, I'm JW the DM, and today I will be talking about the starter set, the new starter set for the second time, take number 2, because now I have gotten to play it in real life in person. So, what did I think of it? First, just to let you know, I was playing with my family, my 2 kids and my wife, and I think it went well. I think that it works. I think it's very good at bringing in new players and new DMs. The text that you see at the sides of the booklets and such that tell DMs what to do. Now, granted, I was ignoring most of that. I only looked at it before my previous review. But, it does a good job introducing people. There are things that it kind of misses out on, though, or does that I don't love. And then there's something to do with the online versions, which I'll get to in a little bit. Now, I probably should have, now, meant for a beginner DM and a beginner players like my wife is. My kids have played before, but my wife has never really played before. It does have an instruction in the Wilderness book, which is where my family began their adventure, and they started out on the trail because it just made sense as the place where they would be, entering into this map. And unfortunately, rather than just saying, you know what, these are new players, or relatively new players, I'm going to go through the list of potential trail encounters I rolled as a random encounter. Let me read you the directions. Each time the characters use the trail, roll once on the trail encounters table to determine what the characters encounter. If this is your first time being the DM, run the encounters in the order presented. That's there-ish. I think I've got that in camera. Now, I think my wife needed more role play to get into the game. She's tried to play before and she's never glommed onto it. She's only ever done well with the role play aspect. And I rolled Bandit Ambush number 4, and unfortunately, with that being the very first thing that happened in the game for her, other than learning her character sheet, she got bored at the pace of combat, as so many people who don't manage to play D&D do. It went the same speed that I've ever seen combat go, if not just a little bit faster. It just wasn't certain people just can't engage with that. And so that's fine. But my kids did awesomely. In fact, my older child was very creative and did things like whacking them with the bad guys with lanterns and trying to set them a flame, and then making a called shot where throwing a dagger into a leg so that, that they weren't just outright killing a bad guy who didn't seem to want to kill them either. And I think it worked, for them it was great. Now, the character sheets, now that I've seen them in action, they're pretty cool. I like how the skill proficiencies are listed underneath the ability scores, or rather the ability score modifiers. I think that that's really great, a good way to organize that and make sense out of something that on the regular character sheet is just a column with little things in parentheses saying what they're attached to. I do wonder about the transition once people get to third level and above, when they get to 4th level, how are they going to transition back to regular character sheets where you have the actual ability scores 3 to 18 to figure out, and then the modifiers, and your skills are all in a column and not, in a nice organized way that makes sense. I think that there's going to be some people who have a little bit of difficulty. I think that also the designers went just a little bit too far towards trying to recreate a board games feel by doing things like having you have to put I don't know if you can see these circles on camera, but those circles are supposed to be used with power tokens. And you put the tokens in there and it shows you your spell slots for first level, and you take one out when you've got one. There's another area for spell slots for later on for another token there. And then there is something that I really didn't like, which is hit points. You're supposed to, and gold pieces, to be honest, gold pieces, hit points, and these power tokens, you're supposed to put the number of them that you have, like on your sheet or near your sheet, and then exchange them around instead of just doing the math. You have to do the math anyway, just to know what tokens, what combination of tokens to pick up. But now you have to do that picking up. You can't just do the math on a page and just write down the new token amount. I would have loved for them to have put a space in here for people to maybe write in with pencil or with, this is a pretty glossy surface. You could probably do it with permanent marker, or not permanent marker, dry erase marker or wet erase marker, but something where you would keep track that way rather than using these tokens. So say, you've got 7 hit points, you've got a 5-piece hit point token and 2 1 hit point tokens. And then somebody does 3 points of damage to you. So now you get rid of the 5 hit point token and grab 2 more 1 hit point tokens. And it's kind of annoying and a little unnecessary. And then because, what if you have a small table? We don't have a big table. We're using a card table to play on. And so you need to kind of pick up and shuffle around your character card, and the tokens go sliding everywhere. And it's just, I like the design of the simplicity and where you put like equipment cards and spell cards and all of that. And those things are great because you get cards that tell you what things are on the back of them, and they show you a nice picture and say what they are on the front of them. And the cards are great. They're a great way to introduce people into equipment and spells and etc. But forcing these other small tokens onto your page, I think, just doesn't work right. And that's another thing that, I don't know, that'll be interesting in the transition from 3rd level to 4th level when people have to go to regular character sheets. The play guide, we thankfully didn't have to go into. Lost Mine of Phandelver has the basic rules, player's guide. The Dragon of Icespire Peak has a player's guide or essential. I can't remember what it's called in there. Dragons of Stormwreck Isle has player's guide, and it's basically all the same stuff. And it's decently lengthy. It goes a little bit more into detail about how to use the cards and all of that, but we got to skip most of that because one of my kids was fairly knowledgeable about what happens in D&D, and then you had me, who's been DMing a very, very long time. So I got to walk them through it in person, which I think is a big help because it's already, even when they're trying to make it simple, look how thick this book still is. It is still, what is it? 32 pages, 31 pages long. I mean, that's a lot of stuff that you would have to read or try to read before your first session. So it's better to, it's as good as this box is, as good as this starter set is for starters. One thing it shares in common with the other starter sets, including the essential set, is that you have to, if you're a new DM or you're a new player and you don't have an experienced player or experienced DM working with you, you have a big book to try and get through to understand what the hell's happening. Most new DMs, of course, don't realize that as long as you know the core mechanic or the micker, you can actually just play without knowing all of the rules. And just to re-explain what core mechanic and micker are, the core mechanic, say in D&D, is rolling a D20. It's a D20 check. That's what it's officially called, D20 test. you're rolling against a target number, and that's, you know, nearly everything that you do in the game is, except for rolling damage or rolling on a random encounters table, is rolling a d20. Now, the Micker is the most important core rules, and to me, that is combat. And combat does need to be gotten into a little bit. You don't need to know all the ins and outs of combat, but you need to know enough that, or have someone in your group know enough to understand what the back of the cards say. And of course, that was me and my other child. But so that there's a few things. If they could streamline anything, I would love them to streamline the level of the rules rather than putting extra tokens on the class cards. The books do a very good job. Obviously, I ignore a lot of the stuff that's in the books, but you can see they put a lot of material on half of most of these pages for what the newbie DM should be knowing about what they're doing. Here you go. Here's better for showing on both of these pages that there's a lot of intro text for the DMs to learn about. That happens in all three core books. I don't remember if I brought it up already. My wife, I made the mistake of going straight into a combat encounter or rolling a random encounter. Oh, I did do that. I think that there's something for saying, start in the wilderness, go to the keep. I think that there might be something to go for, maybe one wilderness encounter on the trail, maybe a role play, maybe followed up by one combat after a role play, and then get them in the keep as soon as possible. That might be good for newer players who might be turned off by combat. They might need to get invested in their characters and how their characters talk and whatnot before they really can sit there and stay engaged when it's not their turn. When it's not their turn in the round during combat, they can still have something to be thinking about and whatnot. Because let's face it, at low levels, there's not a lot of strategy that you're thinking about. Unlike my older kid who was whacking people with lanterns and setting them on fire and throwing cold shots of a dagger into the bad guy's leg. But aside from how creative he is, my wife and my other child were very much just bonk him on the head, right? So that's going to be a lot of people's first experience with role-playing combat is going to be bonk them on the head. So some of these people might need a little bit of a hook to get them to get through combat. My wife, she'll never play D&D again. I know this already. I've tried 3 different times giving her games, but oh well. Now, on to, what's next? I've already discussed the tokens. It is now the in-person game. It's very cool that they give you all the tokens that they do. And of course, the PC tokens are stand-up. The player character tokens are stand-up. Stand-up tokens. Everything else is flat. All the monster tokens and terrain tokens and all that. But it's really nice to have them because, if you're into miniatures and you do a lot of in-person gaming and you don't do theater of the mind when you're doing in-person gaming, it's great. Excuse me. It's great to have that all laid out and on your 5 by 5 foot square, battle map. Of course, I didn't take the time, and I think most beginner DMs won't take the time to put paper or whatever to be a fog of war over the map so that characters are only seeing players are only seeing what their characters would see. But it works out well. It's a lot of fun. They like moving their characters around, and I have a ton of miniatures, but none that would have worked for what they were doing. And in that session, so all of that worked great. We have a card table. So some of the maps they fill up one end of the card table completely, but it works out. It works out well. Now, how some of this transitions online, and that's another thing I have worries about. This card does do a really good job of breaking things down and making them simple so that an absolute beginner player, or maybe has only had like one game before or something, can really, they lay down a card here and a card here and a card here. And, they put their power to, they should probably just write down 2 for spell slots. But, it's a good thing. But in the online versions of Heroes of the Borderlands, unfortunately, you can only use one of, or not one of, but there's 4 pre-made characters with regular character sheets. But 4 pre-made characters: the wizard, the cleric, the fighter, the rogue. And granted, it's great. None of them have names, just like these don't. You have to name the character at the beginning of the session, which is fun. My younger child named her, what did she play? Well, anyway, she named her character as in AA, just AA, and that was great. But online, it's a little bit, you're going to have to walk them through the character sheets. They're going to have to know whether you're in Roll20 or in D&D Beyond. And actually, I'll tell you this, I like D&D Roll20's character sheet actually pretty well at the moment. But it looks a little simpler to me. But in either case, or in Foundry or wherever you're going or whatever you're using, you're going to have the standard character sheet. And you'll still have to walk your players, your newer players, through that sheet so that they understand what they're looking for. I wish that they had figured out, WotC and their partners had figured out some way to do this for an online interface for character sheets, and also to allow the choice of race and background. The pre-made characters, as you have an elf wizard, you have a dwarf cleric. And how many dwarf clerics are there in the world? It seems like every pre-made dwarf is a cleric. But you've got the same backgrounds: acolyte for the cleric, right? Sage for the wizard. And they're already pre-picked. And in the in-person version, background and species are not pre-picked. So say, even though my older child picked halfling for the rogue, which is what the pre-made halfling has, he actually picked sage for his background and got a couple of spells out of it. So he was a rogue primarily, but he had the sage background and got a couple of spell cards, and then used them very creatively and did some really cool stuff. And that's something you just can't do on the online versions if you're going to use the pre-made characters, which, of course, if you're dealing with complete newbies, you probably want to use the pre-made version. So that's a little bit of an experience that you get in person, but that you don't get online. All right. What else? I think that's about it for my review number 2. And I hope it's helpful to you and helps you make the decision whether or not you try this out or think of new ideas on how to try it out. And I will see you next time. Take care.